Greetings yet again, students of the Force, and welcome back to our archives. Recently, we have been discussing quite a bit about Darth Plagueis, the Sith Master before Sidious. Plagueis' discovery of influence over the midichlorians was revolutionary for both Jedi and Sith alike. No other being in history, including that of the many great Sith sorcerers, had discovered such an ability. This was due to Plagueis taking a more scientific approach to the Force, rather than be swept up in its mysticism. In fact, one of Plagueis' main critiques of both the Jedi and the ancient Sith is that they only seemed to take the Force at face value, and only wanted to pursue the spirituality of it rather than ask the deeper questions of why and how it operated. This led Plagueis on a journey of discovery, one that resulted in the culmination of his power and his ability to create life by influencing the midichlorians, but also one that left a long trail of crime and experiments in his wake. His discovery of creating life was one that took many decades for him to perfect, and like any scientific discovery, there was a period of trial and experimentation. And when concerning life itself, the experiments are rarely humane in the slightest. So what were Plagueis' experiments actually like? What moral corners did he have to cut in order to achieve his ultimate goal? What horrific lines did he cross? Well, students of the Force, today we are going to sift through Plagueis' research notes and open up yet another holocron in order to find out. Before we begin though, our logs indicate that many visitors that have passed through this research center have not yet subscribed, so if you enjoy this kind of content, be sure to drop a like and force crush that subscribe button to stay up to date with all things Star Wars. Now, let us begin. We know of quite a few instances of Darth Plagueis' experiments, which he briefly mentions in his research notes in his chapter in the Book of the Sith. He mentions that cutting the amount of midichlorians in a subject will result in death. He also concludes that midichlorians are necessary for life to exist, since most normal non-force sensitive beings have around 2,500 midichlorians. He attempted first to increase the midichlorian level through blood transfusion. However, the native midichlorians of the host reject the influx of foreign cells, presumably leading them to death. Beginning with smaller animals, Plagueis got to work on his next troubling test. Plagueis describes the process of amplifying his will through his own midichlorians in order to override the voices of lesser, concentrated midichlorians of his test subjects, in a sense using his own midichlorians to overpower them. Plagueis says that all midichlorians are linked to one universal mind, and thus he found it difficult at first to exert his will, as his own midichlorians resisted being imposed on their fellows within the same animal subject. Eventually, however, the midichlorians gave way, and his will was exerted over them. His first success came with the small animals, but then he switched his focus to using actual slaves he purchased from the huts. The result of his experiment was that he was able to have the midichlorians override their natural life cycles. By doing this, they began to draw upon the Force to keep themselves alive on a microscopic level. This prevented tissue decay on their host and put an end to all aging or even disease. We aren't told who of any of these slaves were. Plagueis doesn't mention it in his notes, and I highly doubt he really cared for any of them. However, I can't imagine what it was like for those souls to have been through having their cells altered on a microscopic level by using the dark side, with the result being their midichlorians could be controlled. Plagueis then began to wonder that perhaps the midichlorians could be induced to create life on a molecular level. Plagueis concluded that in theory, the midichlorians could be persuaded in a mother to create enough cells to form a zygote without the need for a father. The result of this would accumulate to a child that would be so incredibly powerful with the Force that they might have a count of 20,000 midichlorians or even more. And I'm sure you've connected the dots now about Anakin's conception and his midichlorian count, which of course you would be correct. But this is not where Plagueis' experiments stop. He went on about acquiring almost 100 humanoids, presumably more slaves, that were all near identical midichlorian counts. He experimented endlessly with all of these people before successfully prodding the midichlorians into an asexual fission that would result in them being able to multiply. However, in many of the subjects, the midichlorians began to replicate rapidly, increasing the number uncontrollably until it killed the host. 100 test subjects, and Plagueis said that this was a common problem that happened with the majority of them. However, in the margins of the page, he mentions that his experiments had been in the thousands. Thousands of humanoids were subjected to this Dark Lord's sick torture. The idea of having the Force influence a being on a molecular level is discomforting to say the absolute least, and Plagueis did it thousands of times. Torture was one thing, as perhaps Sith in the past did so to extract information. Perhaps the victim's torture would cease when they gave in and told the Sith what they wanted to, but this was completely different. This was evil. It wasn't torture, it was experimentation. The subjects could not give Plagueis any information to end their suffering because there was no information to begin with. However, one of the most horrific tests comes from what Plagueis did with his own rival in Darth Venomous. For context, Darth Venomous was a secret Sith apprentice of Plagueis' master, Darth Tenebris. Tenebris had trained Venomous as a potential replacement for Plagueis should he ever fail. After Tenebris' death, Venomous sought out his rival apprentice, and the two had a brief but ferocious duel for the title of Darth, and the one true Dark Lord. Plagueis won, of course, and had Venomous on his knees with both their lightsabers across his throat. Venomous begged for life, offering to be Plagueis' apprentice. At this time, Plagueis hadn't yet found Palpatine, but the Dark Lord simply laughed at the Bith rival and said that he would always have to watch his back with Venomous around. Instead, he decided to make him a test subject. Not even respecting Venomous enough with a lightsaber wound, Plagueis instead snapped off a poisonous plant from a nearby tree and commanded the Bith to consume it. Upon doing so, Venomous went into a catatonic state. Plagueis kept him preserved for months in a Bacta tank. It was during this time that Plagueis would perfect his craft, with Venomous teetering between life and death. At this point, Plagueis decided to exert his will over the Bith's midichlorians and practice keeping him alive. Soon though, he let the Bith die. But then, he influenced the midichlorians and successfully brought him back to life. He then let him die again, and then brought him back again, over and over. For a month, Plagueis practiced this, until he decided to finally show Palpatine what he had accomplished, and he began to rapidly allow Venomous to die before continuously resurrecting him. He did this so much that Venomous' organs finally gave out, and Plagueis allowed him to die indefinitely. This horrific display shocked even Sidious while he was watching it all unfold. This act was so horrible and disgusting that even the very will of the Force itself began to flee from Plagueis, and it went silent on him. But my friends, what did you think of Darth Plagueis' experimentation? Did you know beforehand what it truly meant when he said that Plagueis could keep those from dying? Did you think that this was repulsive? Or did it shock you that he was capable of such a beautiful power? Let us know down below. And remember, my friends, this is not a tale the Jedi would tell you.